Okay, welcome to the stream, everyone. Uh, I believe we've got about as many people as we're going to get here. We got 6 people in the tournament so far. Not the most people that we've gotten at these tournaments in the past, but it was the amount of people that did, vote for this time on the Discord server. So, it makes sense that this would be the amount that we got. So, yeah, it's 7 o'clock. I'll give it one more minute just to let people, who are potentially late sign up. Um, yeah, so we'll see what happens. I'm fine with 6 people, though, in this tournament. Because, Critter's gotten a fair amount of coverage in the past and a fair amount of people playing. So, it's not the worst thing in the world if it has a locals that doesn't really garner the most people. Because there are plenty of other opportunities to play this format. And plenty of exploration that's been done in this format. So, it's 7:01 now. So I think I'm gonna, start the tournament now. I'll just say, okay, starting 20 now. Yeah, so I'm gonna shuffle up the seeds. If it'll let me, there we go. Okay, so now I'll just share this challenge here. And there we go. So yeah, we're getting this party started. I need to open Dueling Book real quick. But yeah. Yeah, maybe if we had started 5 hours before, we'd have more people. But, this is something I'm going to change in the future where basically I'm going to, specify that each day that people vote for is going to be a specific time frame. So like evening or afternoon or something. Maybe that will help out a bit. I'm also planning on potentially doing like a European time locals for people like who are closer to like Central European time. Which should hopefully allow them to get a little bit more people in there. But we'll see how that goes. This is all sort of playing it by ear, trying to improve for the future as much as possible, and just make the experience best for everyone involved, both those playing and also those watching out there at home now. And also, for those of you watching out there, if you do want to join any of these local tournaments in the future, then hop on over to the YGO from Zero Discord, link in the description down below. And it's a great place to both get games in these formats and also play in these events. We hold these local tournaments and we also hold monthly tournaments as well. So if you're watching these and you're like, hey, that seems kind of fun, I want to jump in, then definitely do that. So it looks like Dump Truck and Soul are both hosting now. And it looks like Dump Truck and Danny has begun. So let's just dive into that game, see how it's going here. And let's see what the challenge layout actually looks like here because I didn't actually show it. Okay, so it looks like the winner of this will face Izuna Gaiden. And then the winner of Soul versus Blah will face PJ Darkness. So we're going to jump in here. Oh, I should join the voice call here, the general voice chat. And yeah, there we go. So now people, on the Discord can hop in the call as well, talk about the games they played or lost potentially if they played in the tournament. So yeah, looks like Danny's going to open with a classic set one. Are they going to set some back row? Who's to say? They might be thinking about how much back row they want to set into something like potential Heavy Storm, because Heavy Storm is at 2 copies in this format. Thunder Dragon in the opener is pretty decent for Dump Truck, depending on what they're playing. The decks that mainly play Thunder Dragon are things like Exodia, because Thunder Dragon can be attributed over their recruiters to bring out stuff. Or also Muka Muka Turbo, so it could be one of those. And let's see who we got in the voice chat. Hello, Izuna Gaiden. Welcome to the voice chat.
Hey.
No. And we're watching the match now that actually, I think the winner of this match gets to play you next. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but DB have problem for about lag for join. No, it's good. Never mind.
Yeah, because this is a good one for you to watch. So it looks like Dump Truck might be on Muka Muka Turbo, which is I mean I really like Muka Muka Turbo. I think it's one of my favorite decks in the format.
Same.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that a fair amount of people brought Muka Muka Turbo because I like to see it. Of course, I know what everyone brought because everyone sends me the deck list in advance. But, I got to keep up the illusion of surprise. Conchu for you asked in the YouTube chat, is Thunder Dragon Colossus legal this format? That'd be so cool if it was. Unfortunately, it is not. But Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon is legal this format. So, occasionally you can have Muka Muka Turbo decks sort of playing a copy of Polymerization or two to go into Twin-Headed Thunder Dragon. 2800 beater is pretty good at this stage in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. And I personally like that version of the deck. It just adds a bit of fun to it. Dark Hole coming down here, though, clearing the Giant Soldier of Stone and a Sangan. So Danny will indeed get a search here. But yeah, so that will search out something from the deck. A lot of good options. You can just search a Sangan or a Witch, and it looks like Danny will indeed search a Witch there. Ooh, White Magical Hat. Brutal card this format if you can pull it off. But there are a lot of outs to it. But, you know, White Magical Hat is kind of necessary in many ways in this format, given the prevalence of Exodia. It feels like most decks do need a way to sort of discard cards from their opponent's hand because Exodia is such a strong threat. So people either play like White Magical Hat or Card Destruction, or even like Robin Goblin. So, Izuna Guide, do you have any like preferences on which one you'd personally play?
Sorry?
Like of like White Magical Hat, Card Destruction, or like Robin Goblin, just like for your game plan for Exodia. Do you have a particular like plan of what monsters or cards you'd play to stop Exodia?
Against Exodia, if I play Muka Turbo,
Mhm.
Magical Hat is interesting. Goblin, but inside for and you can use Cast Destruction because you have Thunder Dragon too, so is very strong against Exodia, and you can draw so many cards with Thunder Dragon. So Magical 8, Goblin, and Card Destruction, both are good. But I forget the name of the card. You have sorry, I forget is a spell.
What does it do?
No, not spell. Trap. You know, Backup Soldier. Is not allowed in
Oh, yeah,
Creator,
that's not out in
right?
this format yet. Yeah, that comes
Oh,
out later. And that's actually very good for Exodia at that time. It sort of brings a bit of life back into the deck. Although unfortunately it doesn't let you add back a head, so it's kind of rough if your opponent discards the head, but
maybe you can. Yeah, on Silly Snake you can. Yeah.
yeah, Silly Snake is a very fun format for that sort of thing. But yeah, I think you brought up a really good point about Card Destruction Muka Muka Turbo, because if you're playing Thunder Dragon already, the Card Destruction pairs really, really well for that. So yeah, that was a really good point. Celtic One
Yeah.
says in the YouTube chat, the winner of the tournament should get to duel again against you if they win the tournament. That would be pretty fun. Maybe that's something we do for future locals. That'd be cool to do. The one thing about like dueling on stream is that then people get to see my hand. And so it's like I trust the people who play in these not to like stream snipe and just look at what I'm playing. But you know, it is something that like is always going to be a potential doubt in the back of people's mind. Like, you know, did the person have the soul read on that, or are they just watching the stream? But again, I trust people in the locals. So you know, maybe that's something we do for future events. That would be honestly pretty cool. So yeah, I like that idea, because you know, I do like watching and commentating these things, but also I mean I enjoy playing these games as well. So it would be cool to actually be able to get some action in these while I'm streaming. But yeah, I think that would be neat to try at least for one locals in the future. Yeah, this is a pretty good position for Dump Truck. Muka Muka's at 1800 attack, which, you know, may not seem like much, but that's the max on a level 4 monster basically in this format, unless you're playing like Jiraiya or Dark Elf, which come with their own flaws. And now Muka goes up to 2100, so it can hit over like Giant Soldier of Stone, things like that. So, ooh, Magician of
Oh,
Faith here.
Swords.
Yeah, pretty good,
Yeah,
but
he came back Swords to the end.
yeah, it's kind of awkward here though, because generally you want to save Magician of Faith for like a more powerful spell. But you got to do what you got to do. Dump Truck has 2 back row, so they're less likely to activate like a heavy storm here. So I think it's pretty decent for Danny here. But Lad Russo 91 says, "Can you not put a stream delay?" Yeah, that would be something that I'd be willing to do in the future. I'm not sure how to change it now. I don't think I can change it now. In this stream, but I can do that for future streams. I generally just like, do what YouTube's default settings are. But I think that would actually be good because oftentimes I react to comments in the chat a bit after they come, and oftentimes the comments in the chat come a bit after what I say because of the stream delay. So yeah, I think next time I will try not putting this on a stream delay and see how it goes. So thank you for the feedback. Conchu for you says, at what point did your knowledge of retro formats drop off? How knowledgeable are you about more modern formats? And that's a very, very good question. So for me personally, like when I was like really following the game, that brought me up to like the end of the 5Ds era. So for most formats, like through 5Ds, I'm pretty knowledgeable. I then like sort of dipped my toes back into the game for some XZs formats, like Zexal formats and stuff. So I have some knowledge about those, but once you get to ArcV and beyond, my knowledge really becomes a bit more scarce. I've seen videos on those formats and things like that, but I haven't really played them for myself. So I'd say like ArcV on is really where my knowledge starts to drop off. But I am excited to dive into those. Like I wouldn't really call myself like a Yugi boomer in the sense that I'm not opposed to playing the more modern formats. Especially because we always do have these older options to dive back into if we don't like more modern options. So I think part of the strength of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that it's ever changing, and it's basically like a different game at different points in its history. So I think it's really cool.
No, all formats are cool. It just Fiber, Yata.
Oh yeah.
The only problem, in my opinion, and is why I prefer GOT, so is because a format with Sentry, Delinquent Duo, and Confiscation have no sense for me.
Yeah. No,
Because if you have both, it's not the same Trinity of God. Trinity of God is Grateful, Greed, and Delinquent Duo. But if you have Sentry, Delinquent Duo, and Confiscation, you probably win.
It's kind of funny because I definitely understand that, and I definitely respect that for people who don't want to play those formats. Like I think that there are a lot of formats that like just have things in them that don't appeal to certain people, and I don't think that's wrong to not play them for that. But it's kind of interesting because when I played Yada and Fiber and stuff, it's kind of like there are so many powerful cards that it actually doesn't feel like the worst thing in the world to be the victim of those cards, because you have so many comeback cards that you can sort of use to dig yourself out of those spots. It reminds me kind of like, have you ever seen The Incredibles, the Pixar movie? There's a quote in that movie because it's about superheroes, and the villain says, if everyone has superpowers, then no one does. And it's sort of a similar thing for me where like if everyone has all these power cards at their disposal, they feel less like swingy than they do in future formats.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's
I
just
agree.
that's just my opinion though. Like I said, like
No, I understand. Yeah.
yeah, and I perfectly understand not wanting to play those formats because like there are pretty unfortunate cards in those, like, and things that can make you feel a bit bad. Heavy coming down here and hitting 2 back row, but Waboku will get chained. Hitting that 1 copy of Mirror Force is really nice, though. Mirror Force is a limited spell for a reason in this format, and it's very, very strong. For more of the YouTube chat comments, we have Ice Cream saying, Critter format is MRD, LOB, STYK, and July 2002 ban list, BTW Conchu. That's a very, very good point for just anyone in the chat who's just like joining or maybe not as familiar with Critter. That's the card pool in the list, and it's very limited card pool, but that's part of what makes it fun. Ladrusso says 5. Oh, I'm not reading that. I know that trick. Ladrusso91 also said modern Yu-Gi-Oh is too much for my caveman brain. And yeah, like, I mean, I think that it definitely does take a lot to get into. Like, I played a bit of Master Duel when it released and stuff, and I was playing like not a meta deck. I was playing like Shiranui and actually doing like pretty decently. Like I made it to the top rank that existed at the time. Like not like the top of that top rank, but like just the bare, like, not gold, but I think it was platinum was around at that time, at the top, but I made it to there with it. And like, it was definitely very different from other formats, but like, I kind of liked it. It was a lot going on, but that was kind of cool to sort of experience. But it definitely is a lot. Like, I was definitely sort of struggling with certain aspects of it compared to older aspects, but that's part of the fun with it. Ice Cream asks, B-Sox, what's your idea when DM era ends? I would probably draw the line at I think it's the release. I think Flaming Eternity, I think it's the last DM pack. So I'd probably draw that as the line. So I do count GOAT as a GX format, which I know that some people are like, oh, GOAT's classic DM format. And it does feel like DM, but it was technically at the beginning of GX. Like you can play Elemental Heroes in GOAT. Won't be that good, but you can play it. So I do count it as GX, but I know that some people just view it as DM either way, but I kind of just draw the line at Flaming Eternity. Ladrusso91 says, well, some superpowers can suck, and that's definitely true. Like there are like certain X-Men comics where like there are certain mutants who are just like, it's like, man, I really do not want that superpower. Like there's one mutant who I think just like kills everyone around them, like just annihilates them. So Wolverine has to go and like basically deal with them because Wolverine's the only one whose healing factor can actually allow them to get close to that mutant. But and that superpower would stink to have. So yeah, that's very true. Syncoric says modern Yu-Gi-Oh is like that Yoda meme, mucho texto. Yeah, a lot of text in that. But I do think that like there are some things that simplify the text a little bit. Like a lot of archetypes share a certain block of text in them. That's like their sort of shtick. So once you know that block of text for that archetype, then they become a lot more readable. But it definitely is a lot of reading, and that meme exists for a reason. So yeah. But Izuniga, since you mentioned GOAT before, what's your opinion on GOAT? Do you view it as like a dual monsters format or like a GX format or something in between? Oh, rip. Maybe they're not on call or muted. Or they might be away from the mic. That happens sometimes. But Muka's going to come down with 6 cards in hand.
I'm
That is
back.
a very strong Muka. Welcome back. So, what's your opinion on GOAT as being like a DM era format or like a GX format? Do you view it as one of those two things,
Um,
or
God is Jake's former? Yeah, he have first elemental heroes. Yeah.
yeah,
Never mind.
yeah? No, I count it as GX as
I'm
well. Yeah.
yeah, true. I very love the God. Is probably the retro format I must play,
Hmm.
but in my opinion, Reaper format are better.
Interesting.
For the same reason, I say not Duo, no Breaker is air, not Tribe,
Hmm.
not Grade, not Graceful. For me, Reaper are better, but I understand why the GOAT is most GX and before popular format is because in I forget the name 2005
Mm-hmm.
yeah
Yep.
is sorry, GOAT is close to tier 0
Hmm.
and probably I not like play in this time, but now the format is totally different. God Control is not the best deck. It's probably Chaos Turbo.
Hmm.
You have Warrior, you have Panda Burn. Some deck does not exist before. So I like the evolution of the format,
Hmm. Yeah, and I think the
but
evolution of GOAT is super super interesting. Especially seeing how it's just changed over a short period of time. Like I feel like a lot of people have been experimenting with it. But like ever since like 2020 or so, I feel like there's been a real explosion of experimentation in GOAT. So that's really cool to see. I do have some thoughts on Reaper format as well because I actually played a fair bit in Reaper format before. But before that, I do want to talk about the turn the dump truck just had because that was a crazy turn. We saw card destruction get fired, then a pot of greed as well with Muka on field. That's pretty good. Unfortunately, that dark hole will clear the Muka, but which will get a search here. But we're getting down to the last 10 cards in both players' decks. And it's very, very close. Like, that's part of the fun of these formats is that, like, you often wind up at the very, very end of each player's decks. And you get to that point where like you have to sort of wonder, okay, what's left in their deck? What do I have to play around? What do I not have to play around? And that's a really, really cool sort of skill that you have to use in this format. Um, Ooh, Last Will is probably the worst card that Danny could have hit out of Dump Truck's hand, given that there's so few monsters left in deck, probably. It's kind of rough, but I mean, it's still a card out of the hand, so that's pretty nice. But I do also want to talk about the YouTube chat comments here. Conchu for you says, Goat format to me feels like a DM format, but honestly, a lot of GX formats feel like DM formats until maybe Perfect Circle or the Dark Arm formats. I think that's very fair. I personally, like, honestly, and this actually ties into my thoughts on Reaper. I feel like Reaper, to me, feels like the first sort of GX format in, like, feeling as well as just, you know, when it falls in the timeline. Because like you have the prevalence of Cyberstein bringing out Cyber Twin Dragon, and Cyber Twin Dragon just feels like such a GX card to me that because it's like involved in so many victories, it feels like GX to me at that time. I do count Go to the GX format, but I do agree that it does feel more like DM. And Edge hosting, your English is great. Like it's much better than my French, so don't worry. You're fine in chat. And yeah, you're doing
I
very
just think
good.
it's me, bro.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to hear me speak French. I tried learning at one point. It's I could not get the pronunciation to work for me. It was a bit too hard to pronounce.
French is very hard to learn.
Yeah,
It's very, very hard.
yeah. I think the most I can say now is like, je n'en parle français, but I think that's wrong. I think I said that wrong. But I mean, that's why that's why I'm not good at French. But for some more chat comments, Vato said, 2020 is when I got into GOAT, then 2021 into Edison, and now exploring all the formats that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has to offer. And Vato, that's honestly kind of similar to my experience. Like I'd played a little bit of GOAT before, but I feel like when the pandemic hit, I really dove into a lot of retro formats, both to sort of like relive a part of my childhood and also just see where the game developed and, you know, how it was at various points in the game's history. And that's honestly why I have this channel, because I feel like a lot of formats in the game's history are not really as covered. And I feel like there are a lot of hidden gems out there. And there's plenty that the game has to offer outside of just GOAT and Edison. And I'm not saying that GOAT and Edison are bad. They're both great formats. Like, I enjoy them both a lot. But I do think that it's cool just to, like, sort of expand your horizons and see even more of what the game has to offer. So, GXE, Pokemon TCG, and more says, explore modern. And I do plan on exploring the modern day formats at some point, but maybe in the future I'll have just sort of discussion about modern on the channel as well. But for now I'm sort of just diving in to the old stuff. GXA says the blue cards are cool. I think they're called links. That is correct. Yeah, link monsters are very cool. Although they definitely do have their issues, just like any card in the game. Vato said I would rather eat razor blades. But I mean, I think that it will be fun when I dive into it. Like, I think it'll be cool. Like, I think that, you know, as I mentioned, every format I think has something that's unique to offer, and I'm excited to explore them all. Like, and if they do turn out bad, we've got all these other formats to play that, you know, we've sort of tested out and have enjoyed. So that's why it's never that bad to me to explore a new format. Perfect Circle is so fun, says GXE, Pokemon TCG, and more. And I agree. Perfect Circle is a format that I'm really looking forward to covering on the channel because I played a little bit of it and I had a blast playing it. And I think that is a very, very skill intensive format, but a really, really good format as well.
Yeah, Perfect Circle is very cool.
Yeah. And you know, in some ways, it's kind of like GOAT in that regard, that it's very, very skill intensive because GOAT also I meant to say Critter, but GOAT it also applies to. But yeah, this format is really, really good at just skill expression. I think you see that here. Like, both players are still in the game at this point, like this far down into their decks, this far down on cards. And it is just really, really cool to see. So we see Waboku being fired on the Giant Soldier of Stone, attacking into the Master Sorcerer, which I do think is probably the right play. Given that, you know, it is the end game, you got to use these cards for their most value. And I think this is a very valuable use of Waboku, because if Dump Truck has a way to clear these Giant Soldier and get in for damage next turn, then that is pretty good. Now, looking at Danny Droid's graveyard, we see 3 Wabokus used up. So, you know, the path might be clear. Of course, there is Mirror Force out there that Dump Truck still has to worry about, but they don't have to worry about Waboku. And they're going to Fire Heavy Storm here, clearing a trap hole. But honestly, getting in for 2,000 damage here when your opponent's at 3,200, and you have not used up a Cannon Soldier yet. I mean, this could potentially be the end of the game if Dump Truck does draw a Cannon Soldier here.
Oh, heavy. Ah, no, trap.
Yep, there it is. Whew, that's why Cannon Soldier is a crazy card this format. Really, really good. Can clear the whole board and deal 1,500. So, a very exciting game one. And as note,
Yeah.
that game one took like almost half an hour, and it was pretty intense all the way through. So, I think that shows how fun this format can be.
Ah, it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
The problem with Yu-Gi-Oh, in my opinion, is I started to play in 2004,
Mhm.
and I played until 2017.
Mm.
In my opinion, the problem is now the game is very, very expensive.
Mm.
For example, in 2017, I need to give, if I remember, 400 euro for my deck,
Oh wow.
and after the ban list destroys the deck. So the problem is when you play Twitter or GOAT,
Mm.
you can have the deck for not really some money, except if you want rarity, of course.
Mm.
But the game actually is very, very expensive for nothing, in my opinion. And tournament is cool. Now Yu-Gi-Oh is a very competitional game. Sorry, it's true, but you need some money for play in tournament.
Yeah.
It,
No,
it makes no sense for me.
and I think that's one of the nice things about like online resources like Dueling Book, is that it gives an option for people to play, without having to drop a ton of money on the game. And I think that that's good, because if you do want to sort of get into the game, you don't not want to necessarily have to pay a certain amount of money to get into it right away, right? You want to know if it's for you. And playing online initially can sort of tell you, like, is this game for me? Will I enjoy it? Do I want to put the investment into buying these cards? And I think that, after, like, I've seen stories of people, like, in my Discord or just in my comments, where they've sort of seen the explorations of these formats, like, really enjoyed what they saw. They tried out some games of it online. They really enjoyed it. And so then they bought actually, like, full Critter decks or full Yugi Kaiba decks or, whatever format they've got. And I think it's a really good thing, because I do think that paper play, like, I personally have a very big soft spot for paper play. I don't do much of it anymore just because I don't really have any friends in my area who like play the game. Like, so it doesn't really make sense for me to get the game in paper. But I do think that paper play, it's just a very different experience from playing online, and it's very, very fun. And I think that playing a variety of different formats in paper can be really, really enjoyable. Now, I wanna dive into some of these YouTube comments as I've sort of let them languish for a bit. So Theodore Coin says pre and post synchro seems like a bigger divide to me than DM and GX. And I think you're definitely right there. Like, I think a lot of people complain about GX because its packs did not really impact the game that much. Like, packs would have like one or two powerful cards that would switch things around a bit, and like ban list would come around, which would shift the meta a bit. But I think overall, you don't really get sort of format warping packs until things like Phantom Darkness, right? Or Light of Destruction, which is right at the end of GX. So I do think that, like, the transition from GX to 5Ds is a bigger transition than from DM to GX. So I agree with you there. Conchu for you said, honestly, one of the reasons why I prefer more modern formats to older formats is the card art. It's shallow, but I feel like a lot of DM cards are insert mysterious wizard or weird monster of some sort. And yeah, it's definitely fair. Like, I think that it does have a certain charm to them, but like, I also kind of prefer the more modern card art. I know that it might be like blasphemous, but I think that it's fun. Like, and if you look at like some of the modern archetypes, I think the card art really enhances the feeling of those archetypes, right? Like, if you look at something like Sky Striker, that's a sort of deck revolving around mechs, and mechs are cool. Like, I like mechs. So it's cool seeing like the art reflect that, and seeing like you got your fire mech, your water mech, all this stuff. Like, it's cool seeing that. So I definitely agree there, where I'm more of a fan of modern art, but the old art does have a nostalgic place for me as well. Mato says 2014 is my cutoff point, and I've seen that a lot. I've seen that sentiment a lot. So I'm curious to see if that will remain a common sentiment, or like as time goes on and people who came into the game maybe later than 2014, maybe they say, oh, 2019 is my cutoff, like toss format or something. It would be interesting to see. Synchrix says, where does modern Yu-Gi-Oh start? A lot of modern formats are old or outdated by now, and that's a very, very good point. I think modern really depends on when you got into the game and what your classic version of the game is, and it varies from person to person. GXE said, Format Library had a circle event recently, and yeah, that is a very, very cool event. If you do want to be involved in more retro Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, then Format Library is also a great Discord to get your retro tournament fixes, because it's very competitive and very, very fun to dive in there. So very cool to see. I was jamming Samurai. Six Samurai is a really, really cool deck throughout a lot of GX. I'll definitely be experimenting with that once Strike of Neos comes around. And GXE says, I'd like to thank you, YGO from Zero. My friend and I got into playing Yada IRL. I get to play on my lunch breaks at work quite regularly, and that's awesome. I'm so happy that you were able to play with them. And Yada, I think, is one of the best formats for that, because it's just a lot of fun. Like, you get to play with these classic power cards, and I really do think there is a vibrant metagame there. So glad that you get to do that. Conchu for You says, to me, modern Yu-Gi-Oh starts at Duelist Alliance, but even still, 2014 Shadow and Burning Abyss are so much weaker to decks that are played today. And that's very true, and that's part of why, the modern sort of goalposts sort of shift over time, depending on the modern sort of, I just said modern, I guess, but depending on the current sort of power level of the game. Ladruso91 says, I actually like old format art, but it's probably because I prefer old school animation. And that's very fair. There's something like just sort of nostalgic about this sort of like, a lot of it feels like computer generated with like old computer programs. And that's really cool to me. Like, growing up around that time period, it's very fun. Raynan says 30-minute game 1 is why I couldn't play tonight. Sad faces. And yeah, that's definitely fair. Like, I'm planning on shifting the time frame for some of these locals in the future, because especially for these older formats, they can go quite long. Ladruso91 says 400 euros. I believe that's around. Well, I don't want to say. I was saying I believe it's around $500 US, but I don't quote me on that. Because the euro has fluctuated over time. So, and also I might not have the best grasp on that. Allison Gomez says, hello everyone, what's up? Glad to have you with us here, Allison. Edge Hosenga said, yeah, it's true for the True Draco Zodiac deck was 400 euros. And yeah, it's kind of rough. And Ladruso then asks, how can kids get into the game if it's so expensive? And that's a very, very good question. And it's one of the barriers to entry that's really preventing younger people from getting involved in the game. And I think that is a problem that we sort of as a community have to deal with. But it's something to consider for the future. Conchu for You says, the price of modern Yu-Gi-Oh is a really bad thing about it. I often ignore it because I almost purely play online, but the price of a lot of decks can be absurd. Yeah, and I also play mainly online as well. So it's definitely something that, you have to figure out, whether you want to play in paper or online. You do have to think about the cost. And unfortunately, the cost is a restrictor for paper.
Yeah, for modern, some staple is more than $100
Wow.
for some staple.
That's wild.
And you need a free copy of this staple, of course.
Yeah, I mean, Raindance does bring up in the chat that it's better than it was in like Dragon Ruler format or Teledad. But I mean, the fact that it exists at all is still pretty rough. And I remember a tweet a while back that was making the rounds in just the Yu-Gi-Oh
for Dragon's Ruler, you have Dracosac is maybe, if I remember, close to $200.
Yeah, and
for one.
Yeah, and luckily you didn't need 3 copies of it necessarily, but like if you were playing it seriously, you'd want more than 1 copy. So
no, Dracosac, you need 3. Very, very, very mandatory. Big Eye maybe 2. Big Eye is probably 80. Yeah, 80 I think.
Yeah.
But the deck is the most expensive, if I remember, is the Lightsprung True Blade. But it have one reason. You need play 1 or 2 Minerva. Yeah, 2 Minerva. And the problem is YCS price.
Yeah.
So is close to $1,000 1 copy.
Yeah. And it's also like Giant Hand too. Like not like Giant Hand was definitely a more optional card, but like, you know, it was a prize card as well, and people would play it at the top competitive levels, and it was you know, very, very expensive. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, CS asks how many more Breaker videos will be in the making before we get recoverage of an older format. I'm planning probably about like 2 Breaker format videos left. I'm planning on covering Blue Eyes because, you know, it got Paladin. And also Blue Eyes is a very popular sort of topic, so I think that video will be pretty good. And also I'm planning a video on like spell counter decks, so that will be very fun. I'm currently building that, and it's definitely a tricky deck to build, but I think the Magical Marionette is a crazy card, and so I do want to show it off. So after those, I think that we'll be diving also, you know, back into previous formats and also into the next formats like Vampire. So I'm not gonna make a commitment on how many videos covering older formats I'm gonna do. It might just be like 1 or 2, depending on, you know, certain, but depending on my schedule basically. But hopefully we'll be able to sneak in some coverage of some older stuff as well as the new stuff as well. Yeah, Conchu for you says I looked it up and a euro is currently equal to about 1.09 US dollars. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I think it used to be more, but then I think like Brexit might have impacted a little bit. I don't know. I'm not like an economist, so I don't follow all that too much. I just remember I did travel in Europe a while back, like 5 years ago at this point, I think. And the euro was, I think, a little bit more expensive, but I don't quite remember. But yeah. Yeah, I think this is a. Oh, Singrick asks any format tier list coming soon. I've generally sort of shifted away from doing the format tier list, partially because they never did that well on the channel. Like they were generally like the worst performing videos around that time, and also because like a lot of these formats have greatly shifted their metagame like over a very short period of time. Because I feel like often like when I explore these formats, it does generate a little bit more interest, and people realize that like some of the things that they thought were true about the meta were not actually true. Like I think with Yada format, like Gravekeeper's topping an event was like crazy and really does show the potential of that deck in Yada. And no one would have expected that going into the format or even at the end of my coverage of the format.
For Yata, not forget, okay, Gravekeeper stop, but is Alephia play?
Oh yeah, well, Alephia is also a basically a god in these formats.
He wins some god tournament with Zombie, and Zombie is not tier 1 or tier 2.
Yeah.
So Alephia is just a very, very good player.
That's true. But I do think there are some things about the Gravekeeper deck in Yada that do make it like in a certain favorable position for the meta. And I think people will adapt to that. And that adaptation will also potentially shift the meta even further. So it's kind of tricky given like the scarcity of events that happen. And when events do happen, you often do get upsets like that. So like I've generally shifted away from tier list content because like, first of all, I feel like it gets outdated very quickly. And second of all, it doesn't really perform the best. I do feel confident in like for instance, with like Yugi Kaiba, I could definitely make a tier list and feel pretty confident in like those meta positions because I feel like Yugi Kaiba's meta is relatively solidified at this point. Like I think there are changes that will occur as people adapt to things like stall mail and stuff. But I think that like I'd feel confident making that tier list. I think with Critter, I'd also be relatively confident making a tier list, although Labyrinth Tank Turbo doing very well in a previous event maybe signals that the format isn't as solved as people have thought. Whoa, Solemn on a heavy. I mean, you got to do it if you're Danny, but that is kind of an unfortunate situation. Luckily, Dump Truck didn't seem to have a Cannon Soldier in hand, but oof. But yeah, and also, you know, GXE brings up a good point about Alephia 2's tournament run, where they said that Alephia was 5-0 before the... Oh, wait, that's the Perfect Circle top 8 cut. Never mind. I misread the comment. But yeah, Alephia is just a really, really good duelist in all of these formats.
Yeah.
Like, really good. But yeah. Conchi for you says, I really enjoy you covering these more unknown, unplayed formats. And yeah, thank you. I mean, I do it because I feel like there are people out there who would enjoy seeing these sorts of things and playing these sorts of things, but I feel like they don't really like a lot of people don't know about these formats, or if they do know about them, they're just like, it's probably bad. People don't play them, so it's probably bad. And I feel like, it's a shame because I do think that there are some older formats that could be as popular as something like Goat or Edison. But the word just isn't out there. So I'm hoping to do my part in trying to get the word out there as much as possible, and try and introduce people to new ways to play this game. So thank you for the comment there. But yeah,
Critter is very fun for me, I think.
yeah,
I prefer Critter to Yugi Kaiba because Yugi Kaiba is very not random, but he is close to Takeout.
yeah, and also
And
it is interesting. Like it's not random. You're right about that, but there's no searchers, so it's
no,
like
not random. Misexplain. Just I prefer a format with monster effects like Critter
Hmm.
and Yukaiba is fun,
Hmm.
but you'd not have some possibility.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Like Yugi Kaiba is kind of the most unique format in the game's history that I've covered personally. Like it almost doesn't feel like Yu-Gi-Oh. It feels like a different game with Yu-Gi-Oh cards. And I think that's really cool because it does feel more like the anime in a way. Um, so that's really cool just to like play a format that just naturally feels like the anime as opposed to like, having to construct your own character decks and make sure you're playing against another character deck. Which is also fun, don't get me wrong, but I think it's cool that Yugi Kaiba naturally feels that way. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, and Conchi for you asks, why do you think Goat Edison became so popular? And I think your comment, Edge Hosingen, or Izuna Gaiden, or whichever one you're going by on whichever platform. I think your comment's right. Like they are very stable. But also Edison has been seeing some experimentation recently, and it sort of fluctuates as we've been seeing. Like if you watch the Edison YouTubers, like E3 Yu-Gi-Oh or Carpath or anyone else making Edison content, like it's cool to see that there are still decks that have not been discovered. And there's still experimentation out there. So I think that's part of the fun of Edison as well, that like people feel like there's still more to explore and dive into there. But yeah, I think Goat is definitely like it's sort of stabilized, and people sort of play it because it is just like
I
yeah.
I leave my turn to play.
Yeah, it's your
I'm back.
time to play. So actually, well, actually, we can watch the end of History of YG One's and Soul 65 match, and then we'll dive into your match, with Dump Truck. So we will feature you on the stream. Yeah, I'm excited to see
No,
how the match is going.
I stopped the stream too.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. So I don't want to influence anyone's decision making there. But ooh, Swords into a Faith is quite unfortunate. Oh, I should update the bracket here. So Dump Truck did win. Oh, I need to click start the tournament. I never did that. There we go. So Dump Truck did win. So I'll just put that in there. And yeah. So we got a couple more comments in the YouTube chat here. Where Justice Punch said that they started their online tournament journey with a hat format. But personally, they've been enjoying Fire Water more because Soul Charge does create some non-games. And yeah, it is an unfortunate thing about a lot of formats is that they're just these cards that, like, if you draw them, it's non-games. And I think that there are people that don't enjoy that sort of thing, and I don't blame them because, it can be very frustrating. But I do like, I don't know, for me personally, I sort of don't mind it as much because there are other formats that I know don't have those sorts of features. So I think every format has something that's like kind of degenerate, even if it's a bit more fair than something like Soul Charge. But yeah, they say in Fire Water, it really does feel like the one who loses is the one who makes more mistakes, and I think that that's always a good feeling to have in these formats. But hello, welcome Cole, welcome to the chat here. How have you been enjoying the stream so far?
Well, I kind of forgot it was locals, and then like I saw that people were in voice in the server, and I was like, oh yeah, it's locals.
Yeah.
But I saw somebody was already in voice, so I didn't join. And then I checked again, nobody was in voice. I was like, oh, is the stream over? I went to the stream, I heard the guy still talking. I was like, wait, what's going on? And it was just the delay. He left
Yeah.
right after.
Well, Lad Russo actually brought up in the YouTube chat, like, potentially not doing the delay for the next stream. And I think I am going to try that. Because I think it will be good. Like, it's good to be able to respond to the comments, like, a bit quicker. Because if I don't, then it sort of creates this sort of chain of, like, well, people hear my responses later, and then they have to comment later, and then I see them later. So it's like, it just delays things a bit too much. So, yeah. So, I'm going to try without delay next time. Yeah, and that applies to, like, if people have feedback about these streams and stuff that they want me to see, just, mention it in the YouTube chat, and I'm always trying to improve. So just let me know, and I'll try and, incorporate those suggestions. But we've been having a great, I think this has been great so far with, like, the conversations that we've been having here. Country for You says, what are your predictions for the October 2002 Forbidden Limitless? That's actually a really, really good question. Very, very tricky to sort of guess that. Based on the leaks we've had for Magic Ruler, there are a lot of powerful cards there. I think the hand rips will definitely go on the list. But beyond that, it's kind of interesting. Like Cyberjar, very, very degenerate card at 3 copies. That could definitely get limited as well. I feel like those are basically my main predictions, but we'll have to see. I mean, I am going to do a banlist reaction for that when it comes around. I think the next banlist reaction I'll do will be for Critter format. But I really did enjoy making that first banlist reaction, so I'm gonna keep it going, and you'll be able to see my sort of reactions to them. So yeah, glad you enjoyed that video there. But
and something that Justice Punch said, every single game, not every single match, every single game that I played in Breaker, the Breaker tournament, every single game I said, if that's Imperial Order set, I have to surrender.
Yeah, Io is probably my most hated card from the DM era. And that may be kind of surprising to some people given some of the other powerful cards in DM. But like I really do feel that it like makes non-games kind of like Skill Charge. Or Soul Charge, not Skill Charge. That's the funny name that GXC, Pokemon TCG, and more calls Soul Charge, which is a very funny name to do indeed. But yeah, I do feel like it's just frustrating. Like there is an out to it. If you have the MST in hand, then you can use that. And also like, IO, in order to keep it up, your opponent has to pay 700 life points each turn. So that can come up as well. But it really is just like a very, very oppressive floodgate in formats where the most powerful cards are spells. So like most of your comeback cards are spells. And if your opponent's got IO up, they're probably in a very good position. And you just have very little ways to actually come back from that position. So
yeah, I think it's mainly the fact, and this is the problem with most floodgates. It's the fact that you can flip. Ooh. Set Heavy Storm.
Yeah, Heavy's the pro set Heavy. That's pretty good here. Thinking about history of YGO's got. It looks like they will let that go through. They had a Solemn set, but I think that's probably wise of them to save that Solemn for later. Because if you think about like how much damage you're expected to take from this position, versus also like the utility of like 7 Tool to the Bandit and keeping that on field, I think that this was the correct choice to just let it go.
Yeah, it's do you pay 3,200 life points to keep 7 tools on the field, and probably not.
Yeah, and I think that's part of where like in recent sort of tournaments for Critter, people have complained, or not complained, but they basically sort of set forth this thesis that Solemn is a very overrated card. And I could definitely believe that. Heavy on the triple back row. And yeah, Soul is going to fire the Solemn there, which does put them in a bit of a risky position. And that's partially why people say, Solemn's kind of an overrated card. Like if you commit into it and you have to fire it early, then you're taking a lot of damage, and that can be really bad in a format like this. But I also think that it's also a very skill-intensive card. Now, I'm not trying to say that like Soul is a bad player, because they're a very good player in this format and a lot of other formats. But even the best players, like playing Solemn, like sometimes you overcommit into the back row, and sometimes you don't necessarily have to do that, or sometimes you feel like you have to do that. And maybe like I feel like with perfect play, Solemn is a pretty good card. But like when you I don't want to call people, because I'm not trying to say that people who play Solemn badly are bad players. I play Solemn badly. Like, it's a card that everyone can play badly at different times. I think that skill sort of issue with the card is part of why it's so difficult to play, and part of why people are sort of being a bit down on it now. But yep, there's Cannon Soldier.
And
that,
GG.
yeah, probably
Unless-
GG unless the other set is a trap hole. They're gonna ask for Prio, but yeah, we do have some other comments in the YouTube chat.
It is
so I
double
wanna-
trap hole.
Yeah, double trap hole. Yeah. Okay, so that does protect them for a turn here, but it's still a pretty tough spot to be in here. Steven Urosevic actually asked in the YouTube chat, Ben, which format has been the worst you have covered so far? And you know, there are a lot of good candidates for that. Like, I generally try and like be positive about whatever formats I cover, no matter what my opinions on them are. Because like, I know that even if a format isn't my favorite, there are going to be people who enjoy some aspect of it. And I don't want to like sort of, you know, make them feel bad about liking a certain format. But for me personally, the one that I have least enjoyed is actually Joey Pegasus format. And that may seem weird, given that like, you know, Joey Pegasus format doesn't have an FDK like Breaker does, and it doesn't have the Yada lock like, you know, Fiber and Yada have. But I think the thing about like Joey Pegasus format to me that I don't really like is like Graceful Charity being at 2 copies is just so degenerate in my opinion. Like, it lets you see so much of your deck, and it's just like, it can lead to these major blowout moments. And like, you know, I'm okay with some blowout moments, like that's fine. But it often feels like in Graceful or in Joey Pegasus format that like you have very little control over whether you're losing or winning the game. And at least in like Breaker format, if your opponent Scientist FTKs you, you know, the game's over quick. So it's like, okay, well, you know, I didn't have control over winning that game, but at least it happened like right away, right? But in Joey Pegasus, like you go on for a bit and then one player just, you know, pops off and kills you right away. And that's kind of frustrating for me. Like, I also do think that like the format feels very anime-esque. Like you're doing these like big swing plays and like these cool things with like these iconic cards. And for some people that will make it a very good format for them. And I don't want to begrudge them that, because I do think that it is very fun in that way. But for me personally, it's just not really what I look for in a format. And so I personally don't like that one. But again, you know, people are going to like and dislike different formats based on their preferences. And that's just my sort of preferences there.
Yeah, if somebody opens up, you know, Graceful, and then they draw into the other Graceful, but then meanwhile, you know, you're like, well, you know, it's balanced because both players can run Graceful. But if the other player, if his 2 Gracefuls are in the bottom half of his deck, suddenly one player is like 6 draw phases ahead of digging through their deck.
Also, if you're doing double Graceful and you're playing Imperial Order in your deck, you're much more likely to draw into Imperial Order there. So it can be very frustrating because your opponent does double Graceful, sets some cards, and then they fire IO on you next turn when you go for your Graceful. So it's like, it's kind of rough. And I think it's the format that IO feels the worst in, personally. But you know, that's just my opinion. Like, again, I think that there are definitely like people who will enjoy Joey Pegasus. So I think that people should like try it out for themselves, just to see how it feels and how they like it. But for me personally, that was my least favorite.
Yeah, to wrap up the previous point about IO,
Mhm.
it's the fact that you turn it on your opponent's turn, and then the timing to turn it off is at the start of your turn.
Yeah.
So you can make your plays all. Now, if it's like you could only activate this at the start of your main phase, and the maintenance cost is during your opponent's standby phase, it would definitely be at least a lot more balanced, because you'd have to turn it off during your opponent's turn.
I think honestly, I wouldn't have a problem with the card if you had to turn it off during your opponent's turn. Because I agree with you. Like, the frustrating thing about the card is that you can't, like, you get to choose when to shut it off or not. And so if you have a play that will win you the game, you can just wait until you have that play and then turn off IO and then win, right? And your opponent can't do anything about it because they've been shut off for the past however many turns. So it's just a very frustrating card in that way. And I do think that, like, if you actually had to choose whether to shut it off in your opponent's turn, take the gamble that, you know, about what spells they might have, and like weigh that cost, like, as to whether, you know, it was good for you or not, or good enough for you to actually let it go. I think it would be a lot more interesting of a card. Raigeki's going to come down
The
here.
end of the game here.
Yeah, this might be
There's
the
only
end. I think Mirror Force is gone. Oh no, Mirror
2
Force is not
Solemns
gone.
and 2 Trap Holes engraved. Yep, there it is.
Yep, that's the last will. So, looks like they were playing a Turtle OTK strat, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem like they were able to get off to the races. So, quite unfortunate to see. But that is what happens here. And I do think that, like, it's interesting that Soul won a treasure tournament recently with the Turtle OTK strat. And I think in that format, it was actually really good because you have like the battle recruiters like Tomato and Mother Grizzly, which can bring out like Catapult Turtle or like Cannon Soldier or something. And you can also use them like proactively with Last Will to really get an advantage over on your opponent. But here, without those recruiters, I think the deck does struggle a little bit. And I think we saw that in this game here. But I want to make sure that we get to feature the game between oh, where is it? Is it already over? Between Dump Truck and oh no, there it is. There it is. It's just Uzuna Geisen uses the Exile Angmar sorcerer name on DB, so I missed it. But yeah, there we go. Caught you for use. Oh, Solemn on a Reborn, very interesting here, but it is very close to the end of the game.
This is the exact sequence that we saw in the last game. We saw Solemn Reborn into Raigeki.
But this is crazy because it's down to a top deck war. Last like 10 or 11 cards in the deck. Both players have very low life points. This is actually really, really interesting. Very, very interesting game state here.
And 30 cards in both grave. Oh my gosh!
That was such a cool ending to the game. Wow.
So his last 3 cards played: Reborn, Raigeki, Change of Heart.
Yeah, I mean that can happen. Like, I mean that's part of the fun of these formats. Like, the Power 5 are like the Power 5, right? They're very, very strong. But they can lead to like these really interesting game states at the end of the game, and they can like warp the format around them a bit. Like we saw Solemn come down at the Reborn, and I think that was a very good use of the Solemn, but that also shows why Solemn is such a strong card there. And it's just interesting, like how much you counter those Power 5 or how much you just sort of accept them and sort of just try and play around them through other means. So very, very cool to see there.
I do find it interesting how early in the game's history, relatively, that they came up with cards like pay half your life points or Cyberstein, pay 5,000 life points. That sounds like something that they would make like 20 years in, but they were very early on. I'm like, yeah, you're giving up most of your life points for some huge blowout effect.
Yeah, and they found out very early on that maybe that was not the right way to design their cards there. Although I do think Solemn is like quite fair for a lot of its history.
Yeah, I like the Solemn cards.
Yeah.
When I started playing competitively, Solemn Judgment was at 1 and Solemn Warning was at 2, and those are pretty staples in a lot of decks.
Yeah, and I think that Solemn Warning is also a very interesting card. I'm excited to explore those formats where those exist. Like, it's always cool to me, like looking into the future and seeing what comes next for our exploration here, because I did, I mentioned this earlier in the stream, like I was really like in tune with the game like up till the end of 5Ds basically, and then I took a break for a while, but I did dip my toes back in some Zexal era formats, and so I've got a soft spot for that time in the game's history as well. And
it is turn 1, and we're looking at a like 10 card hand or something.
Yeah, eight cards, yeah. But that Muka Muka is stacked. 3,000 attack. It's build your own Blue Eyes.
But
Mirror Force will come down here. But if you think about it, that Mirror Force is kind of like a 1-for-1, given that the Magician of Faith on board is kind of useless after it's used its effect.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Oh, and hey, B-Subs,
yeah, welcome to the stream, Soul. Happy to have you here.
And a race.
Yeah. Yeah, but speaking of Mirror Force, I was wondering, since I like basically was like used the deck list from the video, is there a reason why Mirror Force isn't in Turtle OTK for whatever reason?
I think
because
I
I feel like because
Yeah.
like I feel like I was just like, it would be nice to have Mirror Force, but then I realized, wait, it's not in my deck, and I really should have put that in there.
Yeah, that's definitely like on me. Like, and this goes for everyone out there watching and like watching my videos and like adopting the deck lists and stuff. I think that they're good places to start. But if you want to bring them to a tournament, just make sure to double check everything in there. I do occasionally make mistakes and forget to put in like important things. Like in my recent fusion video for Treasure, I didn't put in Painful Choice into the deck, and I think that actually would have been a very, very good card to include in that deck list, and I just forgot to put it in. So I'm definitely not perfect. Like I try to be as good as possible with these deck lists and make sure that they include all the staples that they should. But I do make mistakes sometimes, and that's something to keep in mind. So I apologize for that. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, to be fair, like I haven't had as much time to test out this deck. Like I think that was my first match playing Turtle was just against Blah, and so obviously I was gonna not always just make the right plays. Like interestingly enough, like the second game, it basically came down to like potentially a deck at war because for whatever reason, Blah just did not see any Magician of Fates for just like a while.
I mean that can happen
Yeah.
sometimes.
You
But
gotta grab the pot of greed.
yeah, you got to go for pot of greed here. I mean, that's just. I mean, Raigeki could also be an option if you think your opponent has a faith. But if they've got a faith, they don't have
Or he
spells
has
in
no
grave.
spells.
So yeah, pot is I think the right choice here. Oh, they will add Raigeki
mind.
though. I guess they're planning
I
for
guess
later.
their hand
Oh, they're
or
just gonna fire it. Interesting.
oh,
Oh, okay,
yay!
okay.
The fusion deck, let's
Yeah,
go.
yeah. I was mentioning this earlier in the stream where we were talking about Muka Muka, and I said like some Muka Muka decks do play a poly to go into twin-headed Thunder Dragon, and we do get to see that here. And Mirror Force is gone, so that is going to be a fair amount of damage. Dumbtruck's just gonna fire Trap Hole on the Witch. You never want to be in that position, but you got to do what you got to do.
Was he worried about Maneater? Is that why he Rageki'd?
Oh no!
And Reborn on top of it. Now you could go for
Goodness.
like White Magical Hat here. I think that probably is the best choice.
Probably the best.
I mean, you could go. I
15.
guess it depends on the hand. Like if you need
Oh,
more
yeah.
monsters, yeah, White Magical Hat I think is the right choice here. But if you do need more monsters and you want to preserve your board against like Raigeki or Dark Hole, then I do think like bring back the Witch could be a good option. But this is
I can understand that too. Yeah.
yeah, this is such a good. Oh, but hitting a
Power
Thunder
Thunder
Dragon.
Dragon.
I mean, it's one last card in hand, I guess, but obviously not the one that you'd want to
Yeah.
hit there.
Definitely like a reason not to maybe consider that one, but it really depends. I guess if they feel like they have a good monster lineup in their hand, it can make sense to go for the hat.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you hit a non-Thunder Dragon, I think that's also very good, right? And you might just want to take that risk, but definitely,
Yeah.
definitely a bit of a choice there. And you know, it's a choice that you can like sort of debate, you know, what would have been the correct thing or not.
Mhm.
With the
Yeah.
Swords of Revealing Light, is there any thought that maybe you should have crashed the Sengen so you could get the search off?
I think that maybe, but I think they figure that like they can just do that next turn, right? Like you want to fire swords here either way if you don't have an out to Twin Head. And so you fire swords and then figure you can just attack Sengen into hat later. So that's what I think personally. But I think that was a pretty
Yeah, I guess do it when you do it when you're able to like summon the monster, set it.
yeah.
So I can see that being the reason too.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think Dumbtruck played this well. But I think Angmar Sorcerer also played this very well as well. Kind of
Yeah.
interesting. They didn't tribute the hat, which I feel like that would have been why the Cannon Soldier was summoned, because you want to tribute the hat to prevent the Sengen from crashing into the hat. So that's like I'm kind of curious about that, but Dumbtruck is going to bring out a Muka Muka, and this is potentially going to be a good turn if you crash Sengen into hat and then attack Muka into the Cannon Soldier. That's pretty good.
But we got a Wabaku though.
Yep, but
And we got the
seven tools coming
tools.
down here.
And then
Solomon.
the Judgment.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Oh, that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure. I would
Very
have
rare to
Solomoned
see a
that.
Chain Link 3.
Yeah,
these formats.
very rare in this
Yeah.
format. But it
The
can
counter
happen.
traps can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, the counter traps can do that if you're stocked up on them. But yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that play. I mean, it really does depend on what Angmar's got in hand. But
Yeah. Are they just hoping to like get to heavy? You know, like that. You know, I can see it, but
setting
know.
2 though doesn't necessarily imply they're going to heavy, and they're leaving their monsters in
yeah.
attack as well.
I'm a fan of that Solemn because he would get cooked by a fissure otherwise.
Yeah, it has
I
to.
can see that. Yeah.
But welcome to
Makes
the
sense.
stream, Aratos. Happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Cooked Anyway.
And yeah, this is a very interesting game. Another Waboku.
Another
indeed.
Wabaku. Ooh.
So maybe they're trying to bait out the heavy to then chain Wabaku and then the swords is gone. But it's kind of I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that personally.
Yeah. It is really getting close though, I feel like,
Oh yeah.
in terms of like if the swords is gone, I don't really have a way to okay, they're tributing
Yep, there
now.
goes the hat, and then there goes the cannon as well. I think that is the right choice at this juncture here. However, as Ray just mentioned, if Dumbstruck is a Fisher, then that's pretty rough for Angmar.
If he had done that 2 turns ago, he would still have like both Wabokus.
Yeah, but maybe they were just hoping to find a way to clear the swords otherwise. But
Yeah, I think they were stalling.
yeah, it's kind of tricky here. Oh, and Faith. Oof.
no.
Yeah, Faith for Pot is very good here.
Yeah. It's sort of really
Did
puts
this
into perspective about using the Wabokus then.
this does
So,
get Muka over Twinhead too, because this is 8 cards in
Yeah.
almost 2,400. So 2,400 plus
Gosh.
600, 3,000.
He needs that Waboku set.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or reinforcements. Yeah.
Actually, wait. If he does have Waboku set, can he attack Magician of Faith and win next turn?
Well, Oh yeah, Dumbstruck flipped up the Magician this
Yeah,
turn. So yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing doing
Well, yeah, that definitely is also well, yeah. I guess that does show how Critter can be, you know, like it really like in terms of like different plays and stuff when going back, you could probably have made like a bunch of different plays in that regard.
that.
Yeah.
At least from what I've been playing with my Critter matches, at least I can definitely see that being a big enjoyment factor for many people,
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot to enjoy
me
in Critter,
included.
I think. Like, I think it's one of the best early DM formats, personally. Because there's just so much going on here, and it's a very skill-intensive format, despite there being like some level of sackiness. But rarely do I like
Yeah.
leave a Critter match and I'm like, damn, I played
That's
that
gonna
perfectly
be-
and I still lost.
Yeah.
But that
Oh
will
man.
be the end of the game there.
God.
Ooh. Was that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that is the 2-0. Wow. So
Mm.
Dumbstruck actually managed to 2-0 a second match in this locals. That's very interesting here.
Yeah.
But yeah, very good stuff there. And now we've got the game. Oh, I forgot to put in the result for Blah and Soul there. So we got the game between PJ and Blah. So that should be a pretty fun one as well. Let's dive into that.
Yeah.
Those are one of the
Yeah,
most insane card advantage swings I've ever seen. I think one guy was up like 4 cards, and then like a few turns later, the other player was up 8 cards.
Yeah, and that's how it can
Yeah.
happen. You know, things
Mhm.
can shift quite drastically in Critter, but I mean that's part of the thing with it is like it does take a fair amount of like resource management
Yeah.
and things like that, and it can be very tricky, and you know you can
Mhm.
get yourself out of a pretty tough spot just through like impeccable play.
I'm lost,
Yeah.
but I summoned Twin Aid, so I'm
I
happy.
mean that was definitely like that was so cool to see.
Yeah.
No, it's just the trap all kill me because if he not use trapple, I prevent to use card destruction for summon cannon soldier and OTK, but trapple kill me.
Yeah,
I need the witch attack.
I mean that can
Mhm.
happen, right? Like
Makes sense.
that's one of the interesting things about this format is that like there are just certain cards that like you kind of got to be like, do I play around this card or do I go for the victory now? And sometimes you just gotta go for it, and sometimes you don't. Heavy's going to get fired here, and PJ will let that go through. I think that probably is smart, given that they're running a bit low on life, and if they play Solemn, they're going to run even lower. I want to bring attention to something in the chat that was mentioned here, because I don't want to neglect the chat while we're having these discussions here. Conchu for You says, my friends are trying to get me into Magic the Gathering, and one thing that I don't like about it is that almost no one cares about retro formats or the history of the game. And yeah, honestly, like that's one of the reasons why I'm focusing this channel on Yu-Gi-Oh! And not something like Magic. Like I enjoyed Magic as a kid as well, but it really is like Magic has got other sort of alternate formats. I think that when people play an alternate format from like standard or modern, they play like Commander, they play just one of the other alternate formats that it has. So people I think do care less about like playing back the historical formats of the game's history, which is sad. I mean, there are some like fun old Magic formats that people can play, but I do think that there's sort of less people playing them.
Yeah, at least to me, when compared to what I've seen from like other TCGs, it seems like Yu-Gi-Oh has a lot more like because of how like the ban lists are. I think it does make sense why like say somebody wants to go back to a particular format because maybe they didn't like what happened with the ban list, they can go back to the previous one in that regard. And like in particular, like I know with Pokemon, at least recently, at least they were trying like to do stuff with like the base set stuff, but I don't know. I do wish that like say for me because I'm more of a because with my experience with Pokemon, I've always been more of a like a Hoenn, Sinnoh, Unova type of person. That was like my introduction to it, and at least card game wise too. It was like Diamond and Pearl and that type of stuff. That was like the cards that I had. I'm like, it would be cool if like people like it's there, but it's definitely a lot smaller from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Compared to Yu-Gi-Oh in that regard.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun of playing these old Yu-Gi-Oh formats, and I do think also probably a big portion of it is like one of the big things in Yu-Gi-Oh like around the pandemic and stuff was the progression series, SEMA's progression series, and regardless of your opinions on that series itself, like I do think that it did sort of inspire more people to go back into the earlier formats of the game and be like, hey, how was the game played at this point in time and stuff. So I do think that was probably a big factor as well. But even before that, you had people diving into GOAT and Edison and Hat and stuff.
Or like even with like say history videos, right? If somebody goes back and talks about this like interesting chaos deck, that did really well, or like I remember like one video I saw with which like it became sort of like how I really like one of my favorite ways to play Burn. And when I saw that type of video and how they play, I think it's Womack Burn, where it was basically like it was like an aggro deck, but they had like some burn cards, which I think makes a ton of sense since like if the deck is doing a lot of damage, like having a burn card, right? Like say a Secret Barrel, or I forgot what exactly that list play, but
yeah, no, that was like Stein about that time, I think.
Yeah, but like I don't think they were playing Stein, but
no,
I think
no, they weren't. But it was around that format, like Stein format or so, like Kamikaze, Burn, and things like that. Yeah,
but like I remember that one with Whistle was a little different because I don't think it was trying to like play like a bunch of continuous traps. It was more just like very beat down focus from what I remember.
Ooh, Yuo coming down here, a bit of a rare card in this format.
Yeah,
but
it's nice that they're seeing it compared to my game.
Oh yeah, Turtle OTK also plays Yuo.
Yeah, I have 3 of them. I never saw it.
Yeah, that can happen sometimes, but it's kind of an interesting card in this format, given Heavy just kind of eats it alive. So unlike with Yugi Kaiba, where it's just such a backbone of a lot of decks because it just sticks around the entire game. Like here, it's a bit worse, but it can come up.
Need that protection, yeah.
Yeah, and both Heavies are gone, so like that UO is sticking around likely, unless Faith brings back a Heavy. But Pot of Greed also will help PJ Darkness out of this potentially. They've got a long way to climb because History of YGO 1 is at 7,900 life points, but it can be done.
Yeah, it seems really interesting too in terms of like this like Goblin control type of deck. They're combining like the Robin Goblins with all the 2K defenders. That's really cool.
Justice Punch brings up a very good point in the YouTube chat. And they say it is pretty crazy how influential YouTubers have been in reviving old formats. So IMO, if you like an old format and want it to get bigger, start a channel and grind it out. And I agree 100%. If any of you out there are watching this video and you either like Critter format or any of the other formats that I've covered, or just any retro format in particular, and you're like, man, I wish this had more people, I do greatly encourage you to actually make a channel and go for it. I think that a big part of the success of Edison format is from YouTubers like E3 Yu-Gi-Oh, for instance, grinding it out and showing how much fun it can be in YouTube videos. And I think that generated a lot of interest, and part of the reason why it is so big today is due to their direct influence. And I think that can apply to a variety of formats as well. So I definitely encourage you
Yeah.
to just try to do it, even if you don't necessarily meet with like instant success in the beginning. If you just keep going and like keep putting passion into it, keep trying to just build the community around it, then I do think that can lead to long-term success for a format. So I think that's a very, very good point to make, Justice Punch, and I hope that people do try and go out and do that.
Yeah, like I definitely see it too for I know with Hat and even with Tengu as well. There's YouTubers that are doing stuff for both of them as
Yeah.
well in that regard.
Yeah, like, and I think that's a great way to increase sort of interest in the format. And I know that, there are tons of Tengu Plant tournaments happening all the time. And I think a big part of that is TCG Rewind, going through and, making a bunch of Tengu Plant videos. And I think that that is just such a great way to grow a community. And, it's not something that necessarily like I feel I can really do. Like, I will show off the formats as a whole, but because my channel is generally like just marching onward throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's history, like
Hmm.
I don't really feel like that's, like for instance, I really like Yada format, but I am not going to make a Yada devoted channel and just like make Yada content all the time because it's not what my channel is doing. Um, but I highly encourage you, like, if you want to do that, like jump in and do it.
Yeah, this is why I do really love the locals though, because we do get a chance to like say with we're going back to Critter right now. This could happen with any of the formats if in that regard. I think this was a really great way to keep the other formats around in that
Yeah.
regard.
No, and I think it's I'm glad that we do these, and like that's also why I'm trying to sort of expand the times in which we can do these. Opening it up to people in like European time zones, like Central European time, things like that. We're planning on trying to make it more accessible to people because I do think that like this is a great way for people just to sort of dip their toes into these formats and see if they enjoy it in a slightly competitive setting. Not necessarily as
Mhm.
competitive as like the monthly tournaments, but it's still pretty fun to see. 7 Tools coming down on the Robin there. Probably the right move as you don't want to lose cards from hand, but yeah.
Yeah, and like history has a lot of life points. They can afford to like put 1,000 there
Yeah.
in that regard.
Speaking of life point cost, I think that Conchu for you brings up a very good point. 500 life points as a cost is very underwhelming for a card called Ultimate Offering. You should have to sacrifice an actual person for the extra normal summon. It's more flavorful. I agree. I
Yeah,
say
tribute a monster,
tribute a person. Just
Yeah.
don't actually do that if you're watching. I'm not trying to incite violence. I'm just making a joke. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it discard a card. I don't know, like I feel like that would be how it would be now though. They would probably do something where it has to like banish the card face down, or
Yeah.
if they were gonna make the card today, like actually take up a resource as opposed to life points. Or they'd be like, I don't know, they'll be
Yep,
like
that's gonna be the end of the
they'll
game there.
oh nice. All right,
Cannon
I don't know.
Soldier has won
God.
like almost it's won a lot of the games we've shown on stream, which is part of why it's just such a cool card. Like it can just end games, and it's definitely something that you want to include if you're building a critter deck. It's one of those things that like you don't necessarily think about, or at least when you're first diving into the format, you might be like, oh, it seems kind of like overrated. I don't get why every deck's playing this. But then as you play decks with it and you play games with it, you're like, man, I really wish I could just search out a thing to deal that last bit of damage to my opponent. And then you're like, well, that's where Cannon Soldier comes in. So,
Yeah, and I think in particular with Critter as well, it just like I think it really does show because like you can easily like play say more than one Cannon Soldier just because compared to maybe some other formats you won't have as much room in that regard.
yeah. And like I think we saw that in the Labyrinth Tank Turbo deck that actually did very well in a recent Critter tournament. If I was playing triple Cannon Soldier, you had the room to do that and also fit a fusion package in. And the fusion package didn't come up as much, but like the triple Cannon Soldier definitely did. And
yeah,
it was very good.
I wanted to I wanted to ask who was it, Izuna, right? Actually, if they were trying to incorporate Labyrinth Tank as well, but
Yeah.
I don't know if they have.
I don't think they probably didn't because in this format there aren't like the fusion substitutes. So going for the Labyrinth Tank package is a lot more of a an ask than in like treasure format, right?
Mm.
So
I can see that. Yeah.
yeah, it's a bit iffy. And I think like even Falco, who piloted the Labyrinth Tank turbo deck, I think even they admitted like, yeah, the Labyrinth Tank part of this deck was not why I won, you know?
Okay. Yeah. Like I think like I don't know, like how I like build it as well. I think I took some inspiration with how you did it with Harpies and sort of incorporated it with for the Labyrinth Tank version where you have some of it there, like I don't, but like it's not like I'm maxing out and playing like 3 of like the other fusion like the Wolf, right?
Yeah.
I think 2 is still fine. And it's stat like, you know, the 1400 does come up in the format in that regard. So worst case scenario, you can set it
Hmm. Oh, okay.
in that regard. But
Well,
yeah.
Change of Heart on Login here is making the most of a bricked up Thunder Dragon hand. When you open 2 Thunder Dragon, I mean, this is a way to use it, but
Yeah. It does, yeah.
yeah.
And you gotta get that damage in too. You know? But
it's just a bit unfortunate because like the
Mm.
power of Thunder Dragon is deck thinning, right? And if you draw 2,
Yeah.
you basically you're slightly deck thinning, but it's basically defeated its own purpose. So quite unfortunate, but you know it's still a decent card on its own. And it seems like Dump Truck doesn't really have many other monsters here, so that might just carry History of Wajo 1 for quite some time. Well, Boku's going to get fired
Yeah.
here. Oh, it seems like Dump Truck is in a really tough spot.
Seems like both players are lacking a critter here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It was like there's not like a monster that they want to really put on the board.
Yeah, because
in
if
that
History of
regard.
Wajo 1 had like a Sangan or Witch in hand, they probably would have just summoned it here. Because they're like, you know, okay, you've got like Mirror Force. I don't care. You didn't bring out a monster last turn. So like I don't think that you've got anything
Yeah.
for this next turn. So
And also with what history's playing too, it's going to be more beneficial regardless in that regard since they're thinning their deck to potentially get to a different win condition.
exactly. And we may
yeah.
indeed see that in the coming games. Because so you actually played History of Wajo 1, so you might have a better idea of what they're on than we do. But Heavy's gonna come down here, clear
Yeah.
the board. That is pretty good. Pretty good use of Heavy.
Yeah. Keep a big eye out for it in game 1. Some may say.
Yeah. Well, but History of Wajo 1 isn't playing an extra deck. They can't be playing numbered whatever it is, Big Eye. Number 7, Big Eye?
Yes. Yeah, I don't remember, but yeah, it's funny how that came about and like it's sort of just that became the default of what Big Eye was.
Yeah. But it's Big Eye
God.
is an interesting card.
Yeah. It really was just like the first like really good, I think rank 7 at that point.
Yeah, I think it did come. I think it came before Dracosac. I think.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
Draco Stack was in I think in the same set as the Rulers, but Big Eye was early because like that's
Yeah.
like a card that Burmails I think were playing for
Okay,
a fair
yeah.
bit.
So it's still very
So,
good, but
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
History of Wajo 1 says
No, it makes
missed target. What does that mean there?
I think you didn't see what was targeted.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
well, technically it doesn't target.
It does
but I
not
don't think
target.
it-
Yeah. So one of the
Yeah.
yeah. So like you have to basically in this format you have to solemn the faith if it's flipped up and you want to prevent the effect from going on before you know what your opponent's getting
Mhm.
back. But to be fair, in most cases you do know what your opponent's getting back. Like I feel like here
Yeah.
it was probably gonna be Fisher either way, right?
Yeah, no, what do you mean? I think Heavy is a great inclusion, you know. The swords are pretty blinding, you know.
Yeah.
You
No,
gotta
you gotta clear those
Yeah.
away so that you can see and get in for some damage.
find the Big Eye, you know.
Yeah. Oh, Dark
Oh.
Hole there is very good. A bit of a risky Dark Hole. But you know, it did pay off for History of Wajo 1 there. I guess you could reason that it wasn't Sangan or Witch because like, you know, they didn't bring out a monster and attack there, but yeah, still worked out very,
Yeah.
very well for History of Wajo 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh.
I wanna mention some other YouTube chats here that I didn't get to mention before. Ladderson91 says, I got back into Yu-Gi-Oh! After so many years because YouTube recommended me a video about the history of the game. And I think that those videos are very, very good at just getting people back into both retro formats and the modern game itself. So I hope that I can potentially contribute to that as well. And Kanji for
Yeah.
you says, Big Eye, I think, is honestly one of the most overlooked cards when it comes to Metal Raiders Sealed. And we may see potentially why that is with this Big Eye flip here.
Yeah. It makes sense, especially for if you're win condition. If you want to know how to like play the next couple turns with an alternate win condition, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I would say.
It's also interesting because there's so many ways to actually shuffle your deck after you've gotten what's good with Big Eye, right? Because you've got
Yeah.
the Witches and the Sangans do that, and Thunder Dragon also does it. You can discard a Thunder Dragon, fail to find, and that will shuffle the deck as well. So there are some like very interesting things that you can do here with Big Eye, and I think that does make it a pretty interesting card. And what I think might see potentially more experimentation in the future, especially in a deck that I mean, I'm not going to say one way or another whether History of YGO1's on this deck or not, but like a deck that they may indeed be playing here, which hopefully we will get to see.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We're keeping the viewers in a bit of suspense because I don't think we've seen this
Yeah.
con from them yet, but hopefully
Yeah,
we do
you
get to
know.
see it here.
Yeah. You know, it can it can be very helpful, especially if they're trying to, maybe they're summoning out a really big monster that
Yeah.
involves 3 tribute monsters getting on the field.
Well, if they're playing that, then that is even more based than I thought. But
Yes.
yeah. But it's if people do want to see Gate Guardian in action, be sure to watch out my game with Janjo from the Janjo Zone about
Yeah.
that.
No, I have to respect Janzo. I gotta my respect for Janzo, is a lot, but like it just like rose to like astronomical levels for how he built like both the Great Moth and Gate Guardian.
Dump Truck is really down bad for a critter. Wow.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof, that just hurts to see.
Yeah. I
still
don't know
good.
though. I feel like I'm wondering though. Wait, no, was Swords up at that point, or because I feel like they could have attacked with the Cannon Soldier and the Muka.
No,
Because
Swords,
I feel like
Swords wasn't up when the Cannon Soldier was set because Swords expired when History of YGO1 fired the Dark Hole.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That was what I was. Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, History of YGO1 is the first player to a recruiter, and then we'll get Trap Hold. Interesting play there.
Okay.
But you got to do what you got to do, I guess.
Jeez, and there it is.
Yep, and there is the WinCon. Exodia has entered the building. Now, it's unclear how many pieces History of YGO1 has in hand. We do know that they have not necessarily had the best monsters to bring out on field. So that could mean that they do indeed have a fair amount of Exodia in their hand. Now, we have seen some from previous games that Dump Truck is playing things like card destruction. So that could come into play here. Oh, it looks like they also have a critter here.
Okay.
They're going to Fisher the Witch. Bit of a risky play, but you got to do what you got to do, I guess.
Yeah.
However, this does bring History of YG1 closer to the WinCon. That might indeed be the end of the game. So yeah, it might have been better just to set the Sangan here and buy your time until you draw into the things you actually have to deal with. The thing. Are they gonna do it? Are they gonna reveal or are they gonna... Yep, there it goes.
They're banishing the cards. Yeah. Dun, da, da. Da, 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 da,
yep, that is Exodia there, folks. And that's the reason why Exodia is strong in this format. I mean, we did see Dump Truck brick a little bit on monsters, but if you don't draw your card to the discard, I mean, Exodia can just stick in hand, and the games go long enough that you can draw pieces if you're not already searching them with like Sangans and Witches. So very, very good game there. PJ Dark mentioned in the YouTube chat, yeah, I got Exodia in my game 1 and then not a single goblin sticking in game 2. And that is a bit unfortunate, but that is how it occasionally happens when you're going for like discard strats against Exodia. Exodia can also side out of Exodia as well into a more standard strategy. So there's plenty of ways for the deck to play. It's definitely one of the strongest decks in Critter, definitely in tier 1. Even though it hadn't necessarily seen tournament success in the last couple tournaments, but still a very, very good deck and one that you have to plan for if you're bringing a deck in a tournament in this format.
Yeah, I will say that was the game I did win against history was on the Exodia one, just because I just had all these big monsters and like I was just attacking.
Yeah. And
That
that
was
is,
the way you would have. At least to me, I feel like that's like the best way to deal with it is just attack. You got to keep attacking, but
I don't know.
obviously,
I
like,
personally prefer to do it with discard cards because I think that like if you just keep attacking, you have to attack then into their recruiters that they bring out, and that can potentially allow them to win the game. So I think you do need to have
oh,
like discord card or just in your deck
oh,
somewhere.
oh yeah, no, card destruction should still like be somewhere. But I just mean like in general, like um with like whether you have that or not, like just giving Exodia more turns is just not gonna be it's gonna be more beneficial to them than it is to you. So like obviously like also Magical Hats is another good card in this case that
Yep.
can be
And
good against the Exodia matchup as
and
well.
that's actually searchable. It can be brought out off of Last Will. So there are like I personally like White Magical Hat because it's searchable, whereas Card Destruction isn't. But you know, there's definitely debate on which ones are better, and also you know, you could just play both.
Yes, that too. Like just
Uh,
have one and
History of
maybe
Waijo
have
one
the
says I can do nothing at this
two.
point for White Magical Hat, but they actually could because Karibo is in the format, so they could potentially
Yes.
have gone for Karibo
Yeah.
there. But they did take the
Karibo.
1,000 in their life points there, so
Yeah.
that was
Karibo is the guaranteed discard as
yeah.
opposed to
Um,
you know.
yeah, which is
Yeah.
you know it's a reason to potentially play the card. You know, it also works against like Mass Sorcerer. The reason I don't necessarily like Karibo is that I feel like you're still giving your opponent one card up on you, right? It's just you get to pick which card they kind of go up on you with, and I don't know, like
Yeah.
that's something, but like I don't really think it's worth playing, unless you're against like a really really aggressive deck, and you know you sided in to stop like Gumo attacks or something. But
Yeah. Like I like obviously I think the main niche is just that it's a searchable card that can basically be like a lava cube and it doesn't worry about like seven tools and solemn in that regard.
yeah,
But it really is deck dependent. So
yeah,
definitely more of a side card.
yeah, for sure. And Muka will hit into the Sand game there. Sand will get another search, but I think Dumptruck's in a pretty good spot here.
Yeah. Definitely.
And his
It's potentially.
Hmm?
I was just gonna say this could be depending on from what I've seen. This could potentially be a mirror, but I guess with the Thunder Dragons and there being a lot of Jin.
Yeah, I think based on previous
Yeah.
games that we've seen, it seems like Dumptruck is on Muka Muka Turbo.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like it's a Muka Muka Turbo versus Exodia matchup. And I think
Yeah.
that Muka Turbo is generally advantaged in that sort of game because it's a bit more aggressive of a deck. And like you said, Sol, you know, you do need to get in the damage and stuff, and Muka can be that damage dealer. So
Yeah.
and I think
I was just. Oh,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that like for from history's side of things, I think they potentially went into a similar deck to what Dump Truck is on. That's why I
Yeah.
was saying it's a potential mirror now. But
Oh yeah. I see what you're saying there. Yeah, and that is definitely a side deck option for Exodia. That is pretty good. PJ Arts of Darkness says drawing Karibo too early feels bad for that reason you just mentioned. And yeah, that's another flaw with the deck.
That too.
Yeah, as a searchable, it's okay, but like, you know, ooh, Dark Hole here. I mean, Dark Hole kind of is just a 1-for-1 on this board in some ways.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not entirely, but Magician's used up its effect, which gets a search. The only thing that doesn't really like replace itself here is Muka. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's still good for issue why you want to have. Like you want to fire the Dark Hole here. But I think
Yeah.
Dump
And
Truck's
like
still in a
Muka
good
is
position.
tough to Muka can be tough to deal with at times. I know. Like when I'm playing this against the matchup, I'm just like, what? Oh, I wish I had like a a fissure or dark hole or just a way to clear it at certain points, especially if they have like a ton of cards in hand.
Yeah. And Dumptruck's going to go for a Sangan here. And History Wager 1's going to bring out the Sangan that we knew about before and hit in to Dumptruck's life. And that will just go through. 1,000 damage isn't really something to use a Woboku on, for instance. Let's see what...
Yeah.
Seems like Dumptruck still has a lot of options here for how to deal with this, though. So And History Wide is
Definitely,
running
yeah.
low on recruiters.
Yeah, that's another thing too.
Yeah. Now, Dumfrick's got a lot of options here potentially, but it looks like they're just going to set one, set another, pass back. I think that makes sense. Heavy likely isn't in the future for History of YGO1, and if they do fire heavy, I think that's kind of disadvantage for them because Dumfrick probably has a Woboku set among their back row. So
Yeah. And then I could see them as well trying to either get history to commit or them being able to commit and get in some damage as well,
yeah,
as we're seeing right now.
and this could potentially be going into a Mirror Force, but I think it's still a pretty good Mirror Force for Dumfrick here. And this is like kind of what I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier with like card management, like being able to dig yourself out of a hole. Like Dumfrick isn't in a hole right now, but the way that they're managing their resources here is very, very good at sort of making sure they don't fall into that hole. Because they are potentially playing into some blowout cards like Raigeki Dark Hole or Mirror Force, but they're doing it in a way that they don't really lose too much card advantage from those trades. And
Yeah.
that's how you got to be doing it in this format.
And they also are doing a good job as well, putting history as well at a very, at a they're at a decently low total
Yeah.
that can be very dangerous, depending on how things go in the next couple of turns.
Yeah, if Dumfrick gets in a couple more attacks, then Cannon Soldier winning the game is definitely an option here. And so it's a very tough spot for History of YGO1 to be in.
Yeah.
I don't envy their position here.
Yeah.
Of course, they've also
guess
got 7 cards in hand, so there are potentially things they can do. But yeah, the heavy is coming down. Woboku will get chained. And, this is, I think, a very good trade for Dumfrick here.
Yeah. It's not looking the best right now for history.
Yeah. And I mean, this is exactly what I was saying before. Like, even with the heavy trade, like, it worked out well for Dumfrick because History YGO1 had to burn some cards to do that, and Dumfrick basically only burned 1. They were able to actually get use out of the Woboku.
Yeah, and then now if you want a Dark Hole, it just feels really bad because you're not even getting any damage.
Yeah,
Or,
and there's a Raigeki, so that does clear the board. We may potentially see a Magician of Faith set here to get back the Raigeki or the Dark Hole, because now both are gone, but it's still a very, very tough spot just for YGO1 to be in. And even if they get back like Raigeki or Dark Hole, it's like Dumfrick can still keep up the recruiter pressure online. Change
yeah,
of
but
Heart,
then
though, that's about as good as it can get there.
There were 3 cards that could have affected that plan if it is a Faith.
Yeah, I mean, this might just be the end of the game here either way.
Yeah.
Because if it's Faith, you can get back Reborn and just kill your opponent that way. If it's not Faith, you can just get in for damage. Card destruction here, kind of interesting. So it seems like they don't have a lethal line on board right now. So that tells me that the set was not Faith.
Okay.
Or they're just
that
doing
makes
this...
sense for wanting to.
Yeah, they could be doing this also just to see more of the opponent's deck. But okay, yeah, it was Giant Soldier. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
I guess that. Oh, I was just gonna say because they could have done the other places. They had the last they could have gone for Cannon Soldier, but but with the Thunder Dragon. But yeah.
No, but you couldn't have. So when you tribute the monster, it goes to the opponent's grave, so you don't actually get to fire.
Oh yeah, no. I missed. Yeah, no, I just realized. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think that was the right play by Dumfrick because they had a fair amount of cards in their deck that would do it probably.
Yeah. No, the card destruction did make sense there.
Yeah. Thunder Dragon in the opener from History of YGO1. Let's see if they drew the other Thunder Dragon in hand like they did game 1. But otherwise, it's a pretty good option there.
All right. They got their +1, and they're now going to set 2.
T-set pass, the classic. Very classic opener in this format, especially because, setting a recruiter, not a bad option in most cases.
Yeah, or it could be, maybe it's the fabled Muka Muka.
It could be. Yeah, Muka Muka is also a very good set. Because if you've got 5 cards in hand and you set Muka Muka, then the opponent's logins crash into it. So,
yeah.
So if History of Waju 1 does have the Muka Muka set and they flip it up, then that could be kind of rough for Dump Truck.
Hmm.
But it looks like it is
Oh,
a
Mass
Mass
Sorcerer.
Sorcerer.
Okay.
That's pretty good. They're gonna hit in to the set. It's a Muka Muka on Dump Truck's side. That's what I kind
Alright.
of figured it was. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't want to influence any plays in case people are listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is. I mean, it's a pretty rough spot for Dump Truck to be in, but they do potentially have outs. Heavy here is going to be really, really good. Unfortunately, Waboku will prevent Dump Truck from potentially clearing the board, but Dark Hole will clear the board there. So very, very
Alright.
good position for Dump Truck to be in now. And both players have kind of they're kind of equal in card advantage now, if you think about it.
Yeah.
History of Waju 1
It's
has,
definitely sort of feeling like a fair game in that regard.
oh yeah.
So yeah.
History of Waju 1 does have two basically empty card advantage cards in their hand in the form of Thunder Dragons. But
Oh yeah, but that too. Yeah.
yeah, but it's honestly still pretty close in terms of that. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Okay.
Giant Soldier can wall up quite a bit. They're also going to set another as well. So,
Yeah.
oh, and there's Thunder Dragon on Dump Truck's part, but probably not the
Mm.
draw you want to see here. Probably want to see something a
Yeah.
bit more active.
Yeah. Unless they have well, I guess they don't have Blast Will if they would consider it
Interesting.
in that regard. But even then,
Yeah.
yeah, but even then they would need like a fissure to really take advantage of.
I
that.
kind of don't like not attacking into this set. I don't
Mm.
know. It's kind of interesting. Like, the reason you wouldn't do it is like you don't want them to get a search potentially. But I feel like if they want the search, they can tribute a Thunder Dragon over it.
That too,
But,
yeah.
I mean, I guess that buys
Or
you
if
a
they want
turn.
to crash, I guess if they want to like crash and then set, but even then, like
Well, no, you don't even
I don't
need
think
to
it would
crash. You
make
can just
sense.
set the Thunder Dragon because if you crash, you won't be able to clear in battle phase either way. So
Yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know if they really say like wanted to get to, like say set a faith or so, they can crash and then set the faith afterwards. But that is a bit too telegraphed in that regard.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
So I don't think that would be the best play, but I don't know. I still feel like Dump Truck doesn't. I don't know. I feel like just hitting into the set is fine. His Provider one's
Yeah.
going to set another though. That's interesting. That probably has to be a recruiter there, right?
it could be. Oh,
All swords will help reveal
maybe
what it
it's
is.
double recruiter, or
Oh, looks like that might be Faith then. Yeah.
okay, faith
I-
recruiter.
I don't know. I really don't feel good about setting a Faith into a board where you already have two monsters, but I guess it worked out for Dump Truck here.
Yeah,
I
like I
mean,
guess
I feel like
it
the
was just.
Raigeki.
Oh yeah, no. Oh, it just
no,
the
I
Raigeki.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, all right, to finish what you were saying.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a Raigeki would have been used a while ago. You kind of did top deck it if you had it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still kind
Yeah,
of
it's one card.
Ooh. Oh yeah, that swords is kind of coming back to bite Dump Truck there.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't think that sword's
Yeah.
necessarily the best, but yeah, I don't know. Especially if you got Mirror Force set. Yeah, kind of an awkward spot, but I think you're right, Aretas. Like, Raigeki would have been used up already, and also like if you're Dump Truck and you have the read that the first set was already a recruiter, and then your opponent sets another monster, you're probably thinking, oh, that's another recruiter, so I'm definitely not going to use Raigeki here.
Yeah, that as well. And like I don't know, to me it's just like it's one card. And then like with something like change, you're playing like 50-50s there, unless you like Dump Truck would have had to like set a faith, use change, faith, get back, and then in that regard, I don't know, that seems a little bit not the best in my opinion, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think Dump Truck's in a pretty bad spot here because they just haven't been able to clear that stone.
Yeah.
And so their game plan's kind of ground to a halt, and History of Wide 1's been able to get a fair amount of advantage off this. So, yeah, it's looking pretty rough for Dump Truck here.
Mm-hmm.
But, the game is still young, so it's tough to say either way. Both players are almost at full health, so there's that as well.
Yeah. There's always deck out, even though I don't think it will.
That too. I mean, we do know that Dump Truck was playing card destruction in game 2. And so actually something they could do here is just like buff up History of YGO's hand with like 7 cards in it and then just go for a card destruction.
Yeah, that too.
It might not be the most
Or
optimal thing in the world, but it is something funny that they could do.
yeah, try to snipe out those faiths and to not worry about the recovery.
Yeah.
um,
It's a bit awkward here though. Now with the Muka too. Like if they don't have a way to clear the stone, they likely probably don't have a way to clear the Muka, or at least the best way to do so. Unless they get
Yeah.
Trap Hole. Trap Hole will be able to clear it, but that will
Yeah.
indeed go through. So
but history's been also, playing like 7 tools as well.
yeah,
So
but you
there's
want to
always a
fire the
chance.
you want to fire the Trap Hole here either way.
Oh yeah, no, you regardless, but like I'm more so saying like, you can do it, but it may not be a surefire thing.
Yeah,
But you definitely still do it. I agree.
yeah, kind of a rough spot for Dump Truck to be in though. But that can happen,
Oh.
It's there are removal cards in this format, but there's less removal than in later formats. So, you get these gummy
Yeah.
board states that can be a bit difficult to clear up.
Yeah, there's no exiled or like you can't
Yeah.
just scientist your way out of like
No Ring of
a board.
Destruction. No, I mean, there's a lot of options that are missing in these game states.
Yeah.
Ooh, a
Or
Muka
torrential.
of Dump Truck's own here coming down. They'll be
Mm.
able to clear the stone at least, but that will be met with a Trap Hole here. Now 7 tools will
Yeah,
get fired,
there's
but
the other
History's got
7
another
tools.
counter trap. It looks like they've
Yeah.
got 7 tools as well. So
Yeah.
pretty rough for Dump Truck here. They're just gonna pass
Yeah.
back to History. Very
good,
unfortunate
2
for them. I feel like History is in a very, very good position here.
Yeah. Let's see. And the thing is, even then, like a fissure can't even clear it because you have to get rid of the stone first as well.
Yeah. Oh, Mr. SJM asks, "Hi, where do you normally play this format, and what are the rules?" Came back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel recently and missing the old formats. So there are actually a variety of places where you can play Critter format, which is the one that we're playing here. A good spot to start is in the YGO from Zero Discord server, which link to that is in the description. Definitely hop on by if you want to play any of these formats because we cover Critter. We also cover any other format that I've featured on the channel, and there are always people happy to play with you on that. Another place as well is Format Library, which I believe there should be links to that in the YGO from Zero Discord if you head on over there. That's a place where they play a bit more competitively. I mean, we play competitively on my server as well, but there's also definitely room for casual players on the YGO from Zero Discord server, or at least more so than on Format Library, which is more focused on competition. But
yeah, I feel like for newcomers, it's a bit easier, I think, to be on the YGO's Discord than Format Library.
Yeah, but definitely
At least
join
from what
both
I've-
if you're interested because both do hold events, and playing in these tournaments and events is definitely very, very fun to do. So definitely hop on over to both. In terms of the sort of software that we're using to play this, we're just using the website Dueling Book, which is a free use software, which it's just in your browser, and it's like a manual simulator, so both players can just put together decks in any format and then host games in it and play there. But if you don't know how to set that up and stuff, there will be people in the YGO from Zero Discord server who can help you out there. So head on over there for all your old format needs.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll be happy to have you.
Yeah, Dueling Book for sure, I would say is like probably in terms of like alternate ways to play Yu-Gi-Oh! One of the easiest ones.
Yeah.
Like it's not like you have to download like a whole software or anything. It's just it's just a website and you just have to create an account.
Yeah, and it's
in
free
that
to do
regard.
so. And also another thing is that like a lot of the softwares are automated simulators where everything happens for you, and sometimes they do have different rulings from these old formats because rulings do change over time, and certain cards work in different ways in different periods of the game's history. So that's also something to consider when playing a manual simulator versus an automated one. And I like Dueling Book because it gives you the freedom to sort of play by the old rules. And also it does, I think, improve your knowledge of those rules as well. So that's where we play it. But yeah, we'd be happy to have you.
Yeah, no, the thing too is like because it's not automated too. I think it sort of tries in a way to be like, how would you play this in the actual tournament? Because you can decide how to take things back. Like you can maybe like if you need to like depending on the game state take like rechange a play or so. You can't really
Well,
do that on
it
automate.
depends on the opponent. That's a good point to
Yeah.
mention that like occasionally
Oh,
some
that
opponents
too.
will be more accepting of misclicks than others. And also if you make a play and it's like there is a limit to that, right? Like occasionally there will be instances where it seems like someone's just sort of doing like saying, "Oh, I take that back," but it's actually like something that they intended to do, but then they realized it wouldn't work out based on what the opponent has. And so generally
yeah.
you don't want to be like taking back your misplays too much, but dueling but good to have that option, which can be nice. And if you do misclick, like honestly and stuff, and your opponent will oftentimes be like, okay, you can do that. But not
Yeah.
always.
No,
And,
it's
and they have the right
yeah, no,
to
obviously.
refuse that as well.
Yeah. Like I think it's the best thing about it more so is just like say if like an illegal action happened, right? Like
Oh, it
you
can
can
be
actually go
rewound,
back
yeah.
and yeah, you can actually go back and fix that as opposed to like the automated simulators. They
Yeah.
don't have like
Although on
a
the automated
rewind function.
simulators, you won't have illegal actions at all. So
Yeah, I
because
guess
how they're
so.
constructed.
Y-
Um,
Yeah, that is true as well. Um, yeah, but it definitely like in that regard, like you said, like someone would have to be very meticulous about finding every single ruling for like each single format just to make sure
yeah.
it's like quote unquote accurate on an automated simulator,
Yeah. So it makes
which
sense
can be very
why
difficult.
it makes sense why they aren't normally done that way. But one day it would be nice to do that because like I do think that
Hmm.
automated simulators are a great way for people to get involved in these servers or in these games that wouldn't necessarily know about how to play them beforehand. So I think that they do help new players join the game. But there's finally a Raigeki, finally removal
Yeah.
for Muka.
God,
But oof, after a
it's just
long time.
yeah, it's really not looking great though for Dump Truck though in that regard. Like
Yeah.
definitely the Raigeki is a way to just maybe start having a bit of a comeback, but
I think funnily enough,
yeah.
Dump Truck's win con is indeed deck out at this point.
Yeah,
Because
it
like
really is.
you gotta last like 5 turns or so. It's a bit risky. There are multiple Magicians of
Yeah.
Faith that History of YJ1 has not used yet, and that could easily turn the tables on Dump Truck quite a bit. And they do have a lot of cards in
Yeah.
hand. Yep, there's one of those Magicians of Faith indeed.
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like, well, I'll wait to see what they get back. But yeah, Heavy is probably the best option there.
Yeah, that definitely works. There's
And
also like an
oof,
alternate line as
2
well.
trap
Like
holes. Yeah. Just
okay.
trying to bluff
Yeah.
Waboku, it seems like. But yeah, change on
Okay.
the set. This might indeed be the end of the game here. If History
Yeah.
YJ1 has one other monster to bring out here, then that will be the end of the game. So, History YJ1 says 4 Khonshu, and they bring out Giant Soldier of Stone.
Right.
Did Khonshu ask about it? I don't know. But anyways, still
Yeah.
very, very fun games here. And very cool to see. So let's see if we can get the 2 finalists in here to talk about these games and this locals.
Yeah.
It'd be cool to see their thoughts on it. And
Yeah. Exodia, just continuing to
yeah,
win in like this sort of era right now. He had it recently with Mecha, and now we're back at it again with Critter.
yeah. Looks like Dump Truck can't hop on the stream, but they thank everyone for playing, and they thank us for hosting. And you were very welcome. Thank you for playing as well. So yeah, and,
Yeah. Not
and so
yeah.
let's see if we can get History of YGO1 here in on the stream to sort of talk about the games here. But let's get the replay going so people have something to watch here. And I'll show both hands so that way both players, sort of plays will potentially make more sense or less sense. But let's see if we can get History of YGO1 in here.
Yeah. Night Dump Trunk, and I definitely think he was, both players are playing well in that regard. So
Oh yeah, that was
really
a
good
very,
match.
yeah, very, very good finals match to end on, I think. So, yeah, very cool to see. Welcome. It is indeed Blah. Welcome to the stream. Congratulations on your victory here. So what do you think of the deck that you played and where it might lie in the metagame based on your performance here?
Testing.
Yep, we
Yes,
can
it
hear you.
works. Yeah, just
Yay.
making sure it works.
Mhm.
If Conchu's still here, hi. Been a while.
So
I actually
what
know
do you
them from
think of
Dueling
your
Book.
well, what do you think of the deck that you played and its position in the metagame based on your performance here?
Went very well. I did the Big Eye build this time.
Mhm.
Again, I
It-
actually did this the last Critter tournament, but I got utterly blown out by Burn.
Mm. So
This time, it went much better.
So do you think the Big Eye build is potentially the better way to go for Exodia? Or did Big Eye not really come up that much in your games?
A Big Eye came up quite a bit in 2 of the games. The third one, I just drew really well.
Well, that can happen
For the
sometimes.
most part, yeah. For the most part, it was just beating them with mass control.
Well, Mass Control is another very good deck, and especially if your opponents bring in things to deal with Exodia, like in the sideboard, like Mass Control is potentially a little bit favored because your opponent's sided out of things that might be tailor-made to stop Mass Control. So
Yeah.
one of the biggest strengths of Exodia. But glad to see you repping Exodia
Yeah.
because Exodia, in recent tournaments, it hasn't really seen the most, success at the top tier. But I do think it's still a very, very good deck and a tier 1 deck. And I think that this tournament performance partially confirms that, and that it's still a very, very big threat, even if people are main decking things like White Magical Hat and Card Destruction.
Yes. I basically decided to play Exodia again because Ghosty won it in Mecca, and I just wanted to match it.
Yeah.
Fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, Mecha and Critter are still very, very similar formats, despite having some key differences. And so it's cool to see that Exodia is doing well in the both of them. But yeah, very, very cool to see. So this wasn't the biggest tournament in the world. There's only 6 people. But I still think it's a meaningful result and shows that Exodia can still take names. So cool to see. What your motivation... I'm playing Exodia. I know you mentioned that Ghost played it in the Mecha tournament. But did you also sort of want to prove any of the Exodia doubters wrong?
Not at all.
Okay.
Just wanted to play Exodia so that
I think
Mecha
that's the
and
way
Critter.
to do it. I think that's the way to do it
Yeah.
in general. To go into it for the
So
fun of the
they be-
game as opposed to the,
Yeah.
Potentially, proving people wrong or right. But yeah,
So when people went to look at the legends, like it's 17, the one Janjo hosted, Mecha, Ghost of 41st Past, Exodia. We broke it off from Breaker, but under that, number 19 is going to be me, Exodia.
Yeah. Which is very cool to see. I mean, one of the nice things about holding these locals and recording the results is that people get to see kind of a history of, what people play and what they do. So yeah, very, very cool to see Exodia doing well. And unfortunately, in the next locals that we hold, it probably won't be quite as favored. I think it might actually be, and this depends on if Format Library chooses to hold a locals or not in this. It might be Yada, depending, if Format Library holds a thing in Yada to prepare for the big tournament there coming up.
Drama Llama Classic 6.
Yeah, exactly. It should be a lot of fun. So if you enjoy Yada format, definitely look into it. But we may hold the next locals in that, given that tournament is coming up. And Yada is a very exciting format to play in. So there's a lot of preparation, a lot of testing that people can do for it. And so we might hold the locals in that. But, we'll play it by ear. If we don't hold it in that, then we'll be holding it in the sort of jar format or morph format, whatever people want to call the sort of tournament pack 2 tournament or format that takes place, basically immediately after treasure format. So
Yeah.
Either one format where Exodia has a small chance, or a format where Exodia has no chance at all.
I don't think Exodia really has the best chance in either of those formats. But
that's why I said small.
Yeah.
At least there is a chance in Yada.
Well,
but there is no chance at all.
You can bring
in that format.
Exodia in and see how it does.
Yeah.
But it will be.
I
I don't
like,
think it will be
to
the
be
best.
fair,
But,
It
Yeah.
won't. I'm just
I-
saying
yeah.
it's better positioned in Yada than it is in that format.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very low bar to clear, but it can,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is a bar at least.
Yeah, I know you were saying like Fiber Jar is a bit of a challenge for Exodia, but I don't know. I think like funnily enough, in a way, it could also help Exodia just put the head as well. And I
That's
don't know,
true,
but
but
it is
the
it is very much a battle. In
yeah,
that
I mean the
regard.
issue with
Yes.
Fiber Jar for Exodia is basically it resets its progress on any pieces that it's gained. So, while it can reset the head, you're still losing the progress and starting back from the beginning of the duel, basically. But also, like, the big thing about Fiber Jar is that the damage doesn't reset. The Exodia deck is likely taking more damage over time than they're dealing out. So you're going to start from a disadvantaged position, basically from the beginning. And Exodia already has a tough enough time winning from the start of a normal game. You're probably going to have an even tougher time, starting already low on life points. So that's
Yeah.
largely why it doesn't work. I mean, there are always edge cases where things can come up and things like that. But when you're evaluating the position of a deck against certain cards, it's generally good to think of like the general cases and why they may be good or not good. And I think Exodia, honestly, I mean, I don't know. It may even have a worse position in Yada format, like because Yada format decks are just so overwhelming compared to what Exodia would be. But I mean, it's got a really bad position in either format that you go into. So it's definitely not the best deck to bring to them. But I'm sure there'll be at least some people who try, and that'd be cool to see. But
Yeah.
anyways, as Dumptruck said, this stream has gone on for quite some time. I'm glad that we were able to get you in here, Blah, and talk about your deck and your thoughts on it. And congratulations on winning the locals. But I'm probably gonna call it.
Congrats.
One more thing. Sorry,
Okay,
one
what's-
more thing.
What is it?
An Unhappy Maiden has won a locals. I had it in my deck as well.
Did it
But
come up?
It didn't have to come up. It didn't have to come up.
So
it was
I,
like
I mean,
I consider it like Aquamador.
Did it win a locals then? But
Yes.
Yeah.
It was in
It's
the
in the
deck.
deck.
it was in the deck. But if it
Yeah.
didn't come up, then I'm not sure I necessarily count it as
It's a flex card. It could have been
Yeah.
Aquamador and nothing
yeah.
would have
I
changed.
mean, it could have been Gate
Yeah.
Guardian and nothing. And it could have been Gate
Yes.
Guardian winning.
Gate
the
Guardian.
but
tournament.
it's still
No, I mean,
it's like the backup guys who never play in
Yeah,
a
but I don't
basketball
think that,
NBA
like-
finals just getting that ring.
like I think when
That's the
evaluating,
analogy.
I think that when evaluating a certain position of a card in a format or whether it's good or not, I think you have to only evaluate games where it actually does come up in some capacity. And so I don't necessarily think of this as like Unhappy Maiden winning a format if it never actually came up. But like it's something to experiment with in the future for these tournaments. But yeah, it's not. I think I don't personally like Unhappy Maiden. I think it's kind of cope. But if people want to experiment with it more, they can. And if it comes up in the future, it could definitely be something that goes into the Exodia deck. But I don't think that the results of this tournament really help or hurt its case.
Yeah.
I wasn't even trying to go for that. I was
Yeah.
saying it was in the deck. It won. It's supposed to be
I-
fun.
Yeah. It's the funny technicality. I like to call it.
I
that,
guess
the
so,
funny
yeah.
technicality.
I guess
Yeah.
so, yeah. But
Like,
if you
I know like
and
I know like Chamber and like they've like they would just like play random cards in their extra deck, so I sort of equated to that.
oh that
in
yeah
that regard.
that would be funny.
Yeah.
But again, just like that, it's kind of like it's not necessary for the deck, and it doesn't really have bearing on the deck's success or not. But it's definitely something that people can experiment with. Not really with Chainburn with the extra deck there, because it really doesn't matter in pretty much any case there. But for here, it's like it's a card that people could potentially be looking at and could potentially be experimenting with. I'm just trying to caution people against potentially taking this result as it being a good card or not. And I'm encouraging people to test out the card on their own. But I'm going to call it here for the stream. But again, congratulations to Blah for winning this locals. And yeah, these were very, very fun matches to watch and awesome matches to stream. So thank you to everyone who participated in this tournament. Again, we hold these pretty much every week in the YGO from Zero Discord. Link is in the description down below. And if you enjoy this sort of content, please be sure to leave a like. Also, be sure to subscribe if you're not already. We're very, very close to 1,000 subscribers, and it would be great to reach that goal by the end of the year, if not by the end of November. So definitely subscribe if you're not already. But until next time, I hope you enjoyed as always. I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off. So see y'all next time.
You're on the couch.
Let's get that jank burn mirror.
Oh, yeah.